Hello physical fiends, today I want to highlight the importance of physical media. I know I don't need to preach to you guys, you are already physical fiends, but today I am making a video about games that have been delisted from digital stores with a focus on the Nintendo eShop and the Nintendo Switch. Games that you cannot purchase digitally anymore, but there are physical copies out there. That means you can still actually own the game, and it is yours forever. It's not a license to be revoked whenever companies feel like it. We're going to go in random order. Some are gut punchers, some make sense. Others you probably don't care about, but we should still celebrate that they are available for those who do want them. Let's take a look. Samurai Jack Battle Through Time was a commendable action game based on the well-loved animated series. It had a strong following and the developers did a decent job of doing it justice, more than just a license tie-in, but sadly that license ran out and so physical copies are the only option. In North America, this game was published by Limited Run Games, and it also got a physical release in Japan. Sadly, neither version is cheap these days. Depending on the region and console, it can range from $80 for a standard Japanese Switch physical, up to about $500 for the special PlayStation 4 cover version. Billion Road was delisted from the eShop sometime late last year. It is a multiplayer board game. We've seen a lot of them these days. They are quite popular in Japan. However, the only physical that has English was done by Limited Run Games. It didn't sell too well, meaning that they still had plenty of copies left, and VGP are currently still selling copies of it. Horizon Chase Turbo isn't quite delisted yet, but it is happening, which is a shame because it's a really fun arcade racer. It may not look like much, but it is a great pick up and play title. Outrun arcade fans will enjoy it for sure. Thankfully, despite its incoming delisting, VGP have just reprinted the physical copy of the game one last time in both of its editions, so you can grab it before it's too late. Speaking of which, if you want to purchase any of these physical releases where still available, then you can find them with the links down below in the description and pinned comment. Any purchase made via a link helps support me and this channel in the best way possible. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you appreciate the work I do, consider using a link when you want to buy something. Sega Genesis Classics was a surprising delisting because I'm pretty sure it's still an evergreen seller. Who doesn't want a bunch of Genesis games on the cheap? Well, Sega probably want to milk it some more with a new fancy collection or subscription later down the line, so they had to get rid of this first. But there was a nice reprint just before discontinuation, which means at the time of making this, it is still readily available. Worth it for Phantasy Star alone. Yum Yum Cookstar and Cooking Mama Cookstar are, I think, pretty much the same game. Cooking Mama Cookstar came out, but then ran into legal issues with the Cooking Mama brand, so then a bit later on, the same developer rejigged it into Yum Yum Cookstar, which, while being more polished as an experience, looks more like a knockoff. Either way, both have been delisted, and both are still available physically for a decent price. RXN Raijin is a bit of a holy grail for collectors and shmup fans. It was an early Play Asia exclusive release that never got reprinted, and of course, its delisting has made it very difficult to get a hold of. It's practically disappeared from the internet. It's supposed to be a solid game, not super special, but there's something mythical about it that's made the physical copy a very eye-watering price. God Wars. This is a tactical RPG, a bit like Final Fantasy Tactics. Not as good, but still a commendable option for those wanting to scratch that itch before the Tactics remaster came out. Similarly to Horizon Chase Turbo, VGP were good enough to reprint a good chunk of copies of this before the publisher's license ran out, so you can still grab it to this day. But for who knows how long. Death Match Love Comedy is a fairly recent game for the West. However, for whatever reason, it was yanked from the eShop after just a few months. Physically, the English version was only released in Europe, and I think the price is only going to go up for it. It's a bit of a peculiarity. What has happened to this release? Who knows? The Lost Child is one of those where if the delisting was a bit later than it was, I am sure VGP would have tried to reprint it before the deadline, but sadly they didn't. And so this dungeon crawling RPG is quite pricey, not obscene, but still much more expensive than it should be. Will You Snail was a super rare games release, one of their lesser selling titles, at least in terms of speed. Kind of a coincidence that it is a game starring a snail. However, weirdly, VGP have copies of this. They found a bunch from a third-party seller, and they have it available until stocks last. Mistover was another game that was not just deleted from the eShop, but from every digital store in the world. It is a rather mediocre RPG dungeon crawler whose art style is better than the actual gameplay, but the prices on this one are just eye-watering on Nintendo Switch. $200 plus for a sealed copy. That's nuts. Peaky Blinders Mastermind was an unusual licensed game. When I think of Peaky Blinders, I would not think strategy game, but that's what the world got. It was decent from what I heard, but nothing spectacular, and despite the delisting from digital stores a few years ago, the physical release on Nintendo Switch, PS4 and Xbox is not egregiously priced. Mushihimesama, Espgaluda 2, and DoDonPachi Resurrection are 3 shmups. I'm grouping them together despite being separate releases because they are from the same publisher and they were delisted at the same time for the same reasons. These ports of Cave arcade classics were very nice to have in the collection, and miraculously they all got worldwide physical releases in Japan, in Asia and Europe. They got them at retail. Limited Run did them in North America, and the games can be found quite easily. Not cheap, but not super expensive either, with DoDonPachi being slightly more expensive of the 3 of them. Either way, they are 3 fantastic shmups that, shmup fans, you must have these in your collection. Mario 3D All-Stars, I mean, this is just ridiculous. How can a first-party Nintendo package that has 3 all-time classics on it get delisted, and not only that, but now sell for hundreds and hundreds of dollars over on eBay? Well, 1, scalpers inflating the price of a game that's not really rare. There are millions and millions out there, it's just that people are happy to keep it and not sell it. Secondly, a crappy marketing strategy from Nintendo. There's no need to delist it or stop it from being printed again, but they did it anyways. Thankfully, Galaxy is now included in the Galaxy 1 and 2 double pack, which is available physically, but you are out of luck for Mario 64 and Sunshine. Football Manager Touch 2023 and 2024 are 2 games in the same boat. While it is very normal for these games to be delisted once the new iteration comes out, they only started getting physical releases in Asia and Japan in 2023, so that and 24 are now physical-only games. Remember, 25 skipped an entry, and no doubt 2026 will be delisted within the year. I find it crazy that these only got import releases. Surely Europe would buy them too. Well, if you want them, they are available physically in Japan and Asia. They play in English as well. Monster Jam Crush It is one of a handful of Monster Jam games on the Switch. However, I believe it is the only one that has been delisted, probably due to licensing. This one was published by a different publisher to the others, and it was also the first one. You're probably not missing much with this. Red Colony Trilogy is a triple pack of schlocky, old-school exploitation horror video games. Some think they are instantly terrible due to the themes and shock value. However, others think they're pretty decent survival horror games under the hood. Each game has a different theme to the horror. For some reason, all 3 games were delisted. Not sure if it was because of Nintendo's guidelines pressuring it or some sort of licensing thing, but the physical was a Play Asia exclusive and it is still available until stocks last. I did ask how many copies they have left and they said less than 50, so yeah. I doubt there will be any more reprints after this, but I can't say for sure, okay? Don't quote me on that. Phar Lap is a horse racing game that only released physically in Australia and Europe. It was on the eShop for a good while, for 6 years in fact, and it never ever got a single discount. Earlier this year it was pulled from sale. You'd think that at that point they would drop it to $1 just to get some extra cash. Like, no one is mad enough to pay $40 for this digitally. Well, if you want it now, well, you're gonna have to pay more than $40 for a physical copy of it. Mad Games Tycoon is a pretty mediocre simulation game. It's like Game Dev Story, but with all the charm sucked out of it. It's not bad, there's just much better out there. This released physically in Europe on Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 with some horrendous artwork, which you will have to display on your shelf if you want this game anymore. Bakugan, Champions of Vestroia, a really random game made by WayForward and a franchise thought lost to the mid-2000s. Most people hated it for various reasons. How this got a big push from Nintendo themselves perplexed a lot of people. The European physical is still very affordable, while the North American one is wildly overpriced. Bill and Ted's Excellent Retro Collection a hilarious delisting, forgetting that it was a bad idea from the start. With this limited run release, they had the CEO of the company telling everyone they were going to destroy all remaining copies of the game if you didn't buy it while you had the chance. Whether they went through with that promise or not, I don't know. They should have videoed it. And how many are out in the wild, who knows? But it's not overly expensive. Not that it's worth the money, it's just 2 trash games in one. Taiko no Tatsujin Drum and Fun was probably delisted in order to divert people towards the newer game, which had more monetization opportunities thanks to a subscription-style service, Puke. This one is just more pure. Yeah, there's DLC, but there's still a lot of songs on the cartridge. Also, it did not release physically in North America, only Europe and Asia got this, but it is a bunch of fun and highly recommended for rhythm game fans. I love it. Fitness Boxing 1 and Fitness Boxing 2 are 2 delisted games, probably for 2 reasons. 1, licensed music, and 2, in order to let people buy the newer one, because there's Fitness Boxing 3 out in the wild right now. And, fair enough, I expect 3 to follow suit in the future. But all of the games are kind of the same thing, just more polished with more features and different songs as time goes on. Effie was wiped from the eShop just a month or 2 ago. After many years of service and tasty discounts, it went as low as $2 near the end. Since the game is still on Steam, being self-published, one assumes the console publisher's rights ended, pretty much exactly 5 years after its initial release. It is a 3D action-adventure game, looks cool but is apparently a little on the bland side. It released physically only in Europe on Nintendo Switch, and PlayStation 4 got a release via limited run in North America. Cabela's The Hunt Championship Edition. This was probably delisted because of licensing issues with the brand Cabela. A pretty uninspiring hunting arcade game that nobody missed when it was taken from the eShop. Nobody noticed. The only thing that is curious about this game is that one of the physicals actually came with a rifle peripheral. Killer Queen Black. This had a large multiplayer focus to it, with online being a big part of what made it special. It's a competitive arcade game that many people love, but rarely had the chance to play to its full potential. You can play solo and couch co-op multiplayer though, so it's not a complete washout if you want to add this to your collection. It was delisted because the multiplayer servers that they used was via Amazon, and they shut those servers down, so yeah, they just decided to delist the game. Friday the 13th, the game, surely the license made this disappear into the ether. A huge online multiplayer focus makes this hardly an enticing prospect these days, but I admit, I don't watch streams or anything, but I did used to watch Rich Evans and that other guy play this when they used to play it on their channel. It looked awesome, and I believe there is a small amount of single-player offline support, if you're curious. Jump Force was delisted in early 2022, apparently due to low sales mixed with licensing issues, which I don't quite get since I thought Bandai owned all of those properties anyway, but whatever. It is an anime fighting button masher, supposedly pretty mediocre. It was hopeful of being a popular online fighter, but there is a single-player story mode in here too, but it's supposed to be awfully cheap. Payday 2 was delisted from the Switch, probably due to licensing properties contained within. The PC version is still up and running, minus some DLC that was removed there. This is a bank heist co-op multiplayer chaos simulator, supposed to be very good, but maybe not on the Switch. It's possible to play by yourself, but it's not recommended. Blaze and the Monster Machines Axle City Racers. This was delisted earlier last year, and it is a kids game from Outright Games, therefore expectations must be tempered. It is not a quality game, and even though it's now only available physically, the physical is still very cheap. Not much value was lost. Alterity Experience was also delisted earlier last year from the eShop. There's no physical for this in the West, but in Japan, this game was included in a double pack with the Enigma Machine, an alien conspiracy game that has you wandering around a house at a snail's pace, making sure the place is secure. Not greatly thought of, but if you want it physically, you will have to import it. It plays in English and is still readily available. Maserada Town Story was on the eShop for a grand total of 3 months before being pulled for unknown reasons. It is a cozy action RPG, simply made, but, for a certain audience. I don't know if it contains some secret content that Nintendo wouldn't allow or whatever, but it is available physically, and it is exclusively a Southeast Asian physical, with the game bundled with Menhera Farm, which was not even allowed on the eShop. They outright refused it. The import will play in English for both games though. John Wick Hex obviously got delisted because of the licenses involved. This is a pretty decent tactical game that adapted the furiously kinetic action film series in its own kind of unique way. Now it has been delisted, but prior to that, VGP did a nice little reprint of it, so for the time being, you can still get it for a reasonable price. I wouldn't hang around though. Star Trek Prodigy Supernova, another Outright Games kid game, one designed to get a younger audience involved in the increasing desperation of the Star Trek franchise. Delisted thanks to the brand, this turned out alright, a solid title for Trekkies, and the physical is absolutely dirt cheap as I'm making this. Sociable Soccer 24, this released physically in Europe and it was delisted to make room for Sociable Soccer 25, which itself was recently just delisted to make room for Sociable Soccer Champions. However, only 24 got a proper physical release on Nintendo Switch, 25 got a physical on PlayStation 5. A fun arcade take on the footy sport. Jurassic Park Classic Games Collection is another limited run collection that they lost the license to sell any more of it. They really need to work longer deals than just like 2. Like, come on guys. Unlike Bill and Ted, they did not threaten to steamroll these ones, and to be fair, it is a greater loss than Bill and Ted. They're not classics by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, most of them are quite flawed, but there's still a nostalgic charm to them. Limited Run did the physical in North America, which is mildly expensive now. However, it is a bit cheaper in Europe. Olympic Games Tokyo 2020, you can imagine they wouldn't care about like trying to sell this game 6 years after the event. And despite the delisting, the physical for this multi-event sports game is dirt cheap. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 was delisted for the same reasons. This one is slightly more expensive, but not much. It's still an affordable one to add to the collection, and it has, a lot more personality compared to the official game that I just talked about. It's got Mario and Sonic, for God's sake. Narcos Rise of the Cartels is still a very affordable game on the Switch. I believe it was done by the same team as Peaky Blinders, so they share the same cheap but not wholly bad feeling with each other. I never watched the show, but I assume it was a bit of a hit, maybe just like an American version of Peaky Blinders. Let me know. Nerf Legends, how dare they delete this from the internet? I've got to admit, in the screenshots it looks pretty sweet. A bit ambitious for such a shit licensed property, but I don't think it was very good. I can't see any opinions on it really, and it's still quite cheap to add to the collection. Transformers Battlegrounds, this was deleted from the internet earlier this year, and is another Outright Games release. It is a strategy game, which is probably the opposite of what people would want from the Transformers games, but people just want chaotic mech action. But this turned out okay. It's very mobile-ish in its presentation, but it's not bad, and it's still very cheap still. R.B.I Baseball 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and I don't know anymore. They're all delisted because, a new one always pops up. I don't really need to explain these, do I? Stranger Things 3, the game, another Netflix property that saw the axe digitally. It was only on the eShop for a couple of years, but Limited Run Games did do a physical release for it. Unfortunately, that means the game is ridiculously expensive at the minute. You are looking at over $300 for one of the various editions available. The game looks quirky and nostalgic, but not for that price. I think it might be the most expensive game in this video, at least just for a base standard edition. Unto the End was delisted from consoles due to the developer and the publisher parting ways with one another. This was published physically by Red Art Games on their website, and it's still available on there, but maybe wait for one of their massive sales. They usually do 1 or 2 per year, and this will be like €10 if it's still available then. Hopefully it is. Hello Kitty Kruisers, the world broke the day this game was delisted from the eShop. One of the worst games I've ever played, and yes, I have played it. I have it on my Wii U, which is even crapper. I was going to make a funny video about it, but playing it, it's just depressing. It's not funny. It's still available physically for like $30 on the Switch, but it'll also cost your soul as well. So, what, like 35 in total? Minecraft Story Mode, The Complete Adventure, and Minecraft Story Mode Season 2 are 2 delisted Minecraft games that bit the dust thanks to the license and probably Telltale Games dissolving into a blubbering mess around this time as well. If you like playing Minecraft for the extensive story that it obviously has, then you want these point-and-click adventures with lots of cubes. Wildcard Football, this arcadey American football game, was delisted in late 2024 due to an expiring license with player names, and the game wasn't selling well, or nor was it critically acclaimed to, renew. They just couldn't bother. So yeah, it was on sale for 1 year exactly. The physical is still available in various places for various prices. Warlocks 2 God Slayers was mysteriously pulled from sale on all digital stores in spring 2024. But again, this is one that Red Art Games published on their website, and they still have copies of it, but be patient. Subscribe to this channel, because anytime Red Art Games have a massive discount, I will be sure to make a video about it, because they are unmissable. You'll get this for like €7, I promise you, if it's still in stock. Crayola Scoot delisted due to the brand license expiring. This was supposed to be like a surprisingly decent game, mixing Splatoon with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, that sort of thing. Not the best, of course, but better than you'd give it credit for. Prices are starting to creep up with this one a little bit in North America. Troll and I, a pretty infamous game, probably delisted due to embarrassment. This was an early Switch game that sole purpose was to be laughed at. I'm surprised no chancer has tried to hoover up all the copies and get them graded and tried to sell them for 10 times the price. That's how notorious it is. But no, you can still pollute your collection with a copy of this for like 10 or 15 bucks. Beast Quest was from the same publisher, but was only very recently delisted from the eShop. The physical for this only released in Europe and has seemingly become rather expensive now, reaching about $100 for the European copy. Based on some novels, this is also supposed to be pretty atrocious. American Ninja Warrior Challenge. Now this is one of the cheapest games you can get in this video. It's so crap, it's so undesirable, just a soulless tie-in to a soulless show, I'm guessing, because how could it possibly match Takeshi's Castle? It's impossible. Everything is soulless compared to that. Override Mech City Brawl. This was likely delisted due to making room for the sequel and or potentially some licensing issues. I don't know if there's any proper licenses in this kaiju brawler. The physical release for this was only in Japan. It plays in English. Sadly, it is out of print though. The second game did get a Western physical release, and I would be surprised if that also didn't get delisted in the future due to licensing. There's definitely some licensed stuff in the second game. Ultraman's in there, for God's sake. UglyDolls, an Imperfect adventure, another outright game special, and also one that's very, very cheap to purchase a brand new copy of, like 10 bucks or something. Obviously, the gameplay, certainly not worth it. It's a kind of game where you walk around town, you collect things, and you help ugly dolls against some robots. That's as far as I could be bothered to read. NASCAR Heat and NASCAR Rivals are two NASCAR games that were delisted due to the publisher losing the brand rights. Both games appear to be very similar to one another. If you enjoy driving around ovals trying not to die, then these are apparently solid if unspectacular games based on the brand. I remember the last time I made this video, their deletion was kind of hot off the press, and I think it's what drove me on to make the video, I think. And at that time, the physicals were still very cheap. Now, they are not cheap. G.I. Joe, Operation Blackout, and the Gold Edition are two separate physical releases, but the Gold Edition is a more complete version. Both games are still rather cheap to pick up, and what you'll get is a rather mediocre shooting game. Some old school fans appreciated the fact that the franchise was still getting some love, but you can't have your expectations too high about it. Demon Throttle technically wasn't delisted because it wasn't even listed in the first place. This has always been a physical-only game. I thought I would add this in here. And don't worry, those physicals have been around the block a lot, with one of the biggest cons in recent history. Originally marketed due to the unique rarity of it, it has been pumped out all over the place. Look behind the sofa, you'll find a copy, I am sure. The ACA NEOGEO Selections are home to some delisted NEOGEO games. If you're unaware, these collections are import exclusives. They released in Japan and Asia. There are 10 volumes in total, each of which contain 10 NEOGEO games. They're lovely, fantastic. Almost all of the games included got eShop listings separately. You'll probably remember like every week there was a new NEOGEO game releasing, but over the years, some of them have been taken down. For example, Volume 4 has NEOGEO Cup 98, The Road to Victory. Volume 6 has The Ultimate 11, SNK Football Championship. Volume 8 has Super Sidekicks 2, and Volume 9 has Super Sidekicks 3, The Next Glory. I believe all of these were pulled due to the presence of the Taiwanese flag, which is a huge deal for mainland Chinese people. It is an extremely sensitive topic. I live and I work in China, and literally, here's an anecdote. Literally, the other week, I was doing a geography lesson, and in my PowerPoint, I just quickly, copied a map from Google. I wasn't really paying attention. I've got a lesson in 5 minutes. Quick, anything would have done. And when I clicked to the slide with that map, the students saw that Taiwan was represented as a different color to the mainland, and there was a riot in the classroom. So, SNK, instead of dealing with anything controversial, they just took them down. But you can still get it physically if you want it. DC League of Super Pets, The Adventures of Crypto and Ace, another outright game special, and this one is for the poor shmup collectors who must have every shmup in their library because, against all odds, it's a shmup, a pretty crap one as well. Monopoly for Nintendo Switch, and Monopoly and Monopoly Madness, that's two separate releases, that were probably delisted in order to make room for the next Monopoly money grab. How many times can we release the same game? Yes, I'd expect the third game, that's just called Monopoly, to be delisted in the future too, to make room for, Monopoly again and again. WWE 2K Battlegrounds is a weird game. Not sure if it was the wrestling game anyone asked for, but it was a thing. Not wholly bad, but hardly a classic that would, do the Nintendo 64 era proud. This was delisted only a few months ago, and it is still available physically for a reasonable enough price. Zoids Wild Blast Unleashed, outright games once again. This delisting happened a while back though, and it was a random license tie-in. Surprisingly, this one is supposed to be pretty good for fans of the Zoids series. It lacks variety and production value as you'd expect, but the gameplay will be fun for those invested. The physical is still reasonably priced. Zombieland Double Tap Road Trip is another game that is still reasonably priced, about $20 for a physical copy, but this one is probably not worth it even for fans of the series. It got poor reviews all round despite the nice setup. Reminds me of Dead Nation, which was on the PlayStation 3, just a very crappier version of it. Cars 3 Driven to Win was recently delisted from the eShop, which is kind of sad considering this was pretty much a launch title for the Switch, launch window, and it finally bit the dust. A mediocre racing game for sure, one that even kids might struggle to get interested in it. The physical is still very cheap for it. JoJo Siwa Worldwide Party, another very cheap game. At the time of recording this, VGP have it discounted to $7 US. This was delisted in January to the cries of literally no one, but I guess JoJo and her licensing agreements are non-negotiable. Or outright games don't give a monkeys about letting this one go. And just a little interesting fact, in Chinese, Siwa, that means stocking, so it's JoJo Stockings. Geo Rifters. This was a game that was discounted every other week to like $2 on the eShop. That's why purchasing a physical copy, importing from Asia, was always a tough sell. That's a big hurdle, and there's a big price difference. And also, the game looks like arse gravy despite being actually quite fun. If you want a physical, you will have to import it. Goosebumps the game, I'm sure was delisted because if they didn't, upon expiration of the license, R.L. Stine would have featured WayForward in one of his books. This was the first of 3 Goosebumps games currently on the Switch, none of which are anything to write home about. In fact, this is the most disappointing because it was developed by WayForward, who can make good games when they want to. Grave Danger was quietly taken off the eShop in late 2024 for unknown reasons. This got a very obscure physical release in Europe. It is a cheap, simple-looking platformer, but that doesn't make it bad. It got decent enough reviews, and there's puzzle elements that, it can be played in co-op, which is nice. Alright, so now I'm going to quickly go over some games that were technically delisted from the eShop, but only because there was an enhanced edition launched in its place that is still there to this day. For example, Atelier Lydian Sewell, that was an early Switch game, but a few years back, a DX version was released with all the DLC content included and some tweaks and stuff like that, so they took down the original version. The physical release for the base version was in the West, but the DX version, that is an import exclusive. You can order it from Southeast Asia in a triple pack with the other mysterious games. Same for the Atelier Ryza trilogy, which very recently got DX versions, much to the confusion of many, but the import physical release of that sold bucket loads. Definitely worth importing. Citizens of Space was taken down because of Citizens Unite, which essentially included this game along with the original game Citizens of Earth into one connected package, and that is where you'll find the physical of this. There was no physical originally. Warriors Orochi 4, this got an Ultimate Edition later down the line. Both of them got physical releases, so you might as well go with the Ultimate Edition for the extra content. Roller Coaster Tycoon Adventures, this very recently got a deluxe edition at retail for all your theme park creation needs. Shikondo Soul Eater was originally a Play Asia exclusive physical release, and when it got delisted, there was a frenzy to pick it up. However, years later, we got Shikondo Yokai Rampage. That also got a physical in Japan, and it was a slightly enhanced version. Shin Megami Tensei 5 of course got delisted when Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance popped up, which included the base game alongside an entirely new campaign. And both versions are dirt cheap now, so might as well pick up Vengeance for double the content for not double the price. Alright, there is another subcategory that I could go into, the games that weren't delisted but outright rejected for a digital release in the West, but there is a physical still available for purchase, but I think I'm going to leave that for its own video. It is a special kind of category that deserves its own attention, so if you are new, subscribe so you don't miss that. If you want to attempt to purchase any of the games included in this video that are still available brand new, I have put them where applicable in the description and pinned comment. I thank you ever so much for your support. Which of these delisted games hurt you the most, and which ones are you happy you picked up sooner rather than later? Let me know in the comments below, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Take care.